Our next presenter speaker is, of course, the New South Wales Treasurer, the Honourable Gladys Berejiklian. That is difficult for these Asian tongues to grab that one. Gladys was elected to the New South Wales Parliament in 2003 as the member for Willoughby. After the election, the O'Farrell government made Gladys our Minister for Transport. Following the election of the Baird government in 2015, Gladys was appointed Treasurer and Minister for Industrial Relations. And from April, Gladys has served as Deputy Leader of the New South Wales Parliamentary Liberal Party. She achieved her Master of Commerce at the University of New South Wales prior to entering Parliament and worked as General Manager for the Commonwealth Bank. Gladys also completed studies in Government and Public Administration in a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Sydney. Let's give Gladys a really warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Gus, for that very, very warm welcome, and apologies for being slightly late. I understand that a number of local identities have kept you entertained until I got here, so thank you very much for that. But it's a wonderful pleasure to be here because Sutherland Shire, the Shire, this part of Sydney is really booming, and our job as a government is to make sure that continues. And I also want to really congratulate ShireBiz for being so active in really getting local businesses together, but also putting forward your strong views on how we can make our economy go even stronger. Can I start by acknowledging my parliamentary colleagues who are here, because through them, people like me get your feedback from the ground as to what's going on, what people are thinking, and how we can really work together to improve the local community in so many ways. So can I please acknowledge my state parliamentary colleagues, ministerial colleague Mark Speakman, who's the member for Cronulla, Lee Evans, the member for Heathcote, and of course Mel Givens, the member for Holsworthy. And can I also acknowledge our federal MP, Craig Kelly, who's here, the member for Hughes. It's great to see them all here working together. And of course, in addition to these two tiers of local government, we also have local government here. So can I acknowledge Kent Johns, the Mayor of Sutherland Shire, and also the many other councillors who I understand are in the room. And of course, I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge all of you who contribute massively to the local community through your support for local businesses, but also your support for the community generally. So what I would like to do is start off by giving you some highlights of last week's state budget, talk about some of the things which the Shire has received through that budget, but then get on to the issue of reform that ShireBiz has raised with us. So last week's budget was really a turning point for New South Wales, because when we came to government, without getting too political, we did inherit a financial mess. We'd been left with high levels of debt. The credit rating, the AAA credit rating, was at risk. There were forecast deficits, and the state was living beyond its means. So the revenue growth was less than the expenses growth. So in essence, the Labor Party was spending more than it was receiving, and that was not a sustainable position. So in 4 years, we've really turned that around, and it's been a real team effort, because everybody's had to pull their weight and make a difference. But last week, we were able to announce that we have surpluses forecast for the next 4 years. Our position in relation to the AAA credit rating is stronger than ever. Instead of being the last state in Australia, we are the first state. We have the strongest economy and the strongest budget position of any other state in Australia. And as New South Wales should be, we're leading the nation on every single economic indicator. Now, that 4-year turnaround didn't happen by accident. And there's a couple of principles which you all apply to your businesses, which we apply to running in government. Firstly, do not allow your expenses growth to go higher than your revenue growth. Work within your means. Do not spend beyond your means. If you're managing a business or managing a household budget, you should never spend more than you receive. And that's been a basic principle that we've applied to government. We also made a basic endeavour to make sure we reduced waste and duplication in government in the back office and put all that money on the front line. So we were really pleased to say that, not even including the poles and wires transactions, we're spending more than $68 billion in the next 4 years on infrastructure in New South Wales. And not only are we spending record amounts in infrastructure, but in key areas of day-to-day services like health and education and family and community services, we've increased spending to record levels. And I'll just give you one example in health. When we came to government, we inherited a health budget of around $15.8 billion a year. That's now close to $20 billion. So since we've been in government, the health budget's increased by 26%, and that's just on the recurrent side, just on day-to-day services. And so what we've managed to do is rein the budget position in, reduce waste, invest that money in infrastructure, and in the process, able to invest record amounts in infrastructure and also record amounts in day-to-day services. And of course, underlying all this is making sure our economy is powering ahead, that we're working hard to create jobs, and that we're also investing in the future to make sure our budget can withstand any of the shocks that might come our way. Because as you know, and as is the topic of today's discussion, as a state government, every single one of our revenue sources is very volatile. And so therefore, we have to be very careful and restrained in the way that we provide our budget funding from year to year, because we want to make sure that our growth is sustainable and our investments are sustainable. And I'll go into a bit more detail on that front. But what I wanted to do next was just to outline some of the things that we're specifically giving to the Shire. One of the major announcements I was able to make during the budget is because we have a strong budget position, and because in addition to the $68 billion that we're investing in infrastructure, we're going to get billions of dollars in from the transaction of poles and wires, we were able to bring forward $600 million in planning money to make sure all of our projects are shovel ready for the infrastructure pipeline we want in New South Wales. And that's because we expect, the people of New South Wales expect us to act quickly when it comes to infrastructure. They don't want us to sit on our hands and wait. So we made sure we brought forward $600 million in making sure we get planning approvals and pre-construction ready so that when the money comes in from poles and wires, we can hit the ground running. And some of that money will go towards planning for road gateways to the Shire, including planning money for the F6. So that's very exciting. Projects that had been in the too hard basket for so long are now coming to the fore, and that's a very exciting proposition. But in terms of what is specifically in the budget for the next 12 months and beyond, I wanted to say, make the following, it's not an exhaustive list, but just gives you a summary of what we're doing. So in relation to hospitals, we're continuing the $63 million expansion of Sutherland Hospital, including $32 million in this year's budget alone. We're spending money again to complete the Sutherland Shire Hospital car park, which is a critical piece of infrastructure. And we're also making sure that we're funding extra positions for the nursing and midwifery position, and also clinical support services in this area's local health district. So there's no doubt that we're continuing our strong agenda and giving health a boost in this local community. In relation to schools, we're improving access at Loftus Public School. Again, we're improving access at Woolaware High School and also at Cronulla High School. We're making investments in social housing, making very big investments in public transport and roads, and more than $70 million is going towards upgrading and repairing roads through St George and the Shire, including $7.5 million to begin early planning for a motorway link between the M1 Princess Motorway and at Waterfall and the Sydney Motorway Network, which is what I described. $1.1 million for improvements along the Princess Highway, especially around Sylvania. $5.5 million for widening of the bridge over Deadman's Creek on Heathcote Road and Sandy Point Road. And again, we're also committing $3.7 million in 15-16 alone for the gateway to the South M1 extension planning, which is critical money. We've also allocated, in my old space, $890 million over the next 4 years for the Transport Access Program, but obviously in areas down here like Janelli and Engadine, there'll be lots of upgrades to local services as well as new infrastructure and transport. So we are investing locally, but we know there's more to do, and that's why we're very excited about the future, because we're in a strong position to make sure we make that happen. So I just wanted to talk about our budget position in the context of the reform debate. As you might be aware, 40% of the state's revenue from year to year comes from the federal government. So if the federal government changes its policy, or the federal government decides to allocate more funding one year than another year, it actually means it affects our bottom line. And I'll give you an example. With the recent federal budget, we were expecting quite a bit of money for 15-16, but the federal government allocated it in 14-15. So as a result, our 14-15 surplus is $2.1 billion, and the underlying surplus we're projecting in 15-16 is $713 million. So there is an impact the federal government has substantially on the volatility of the budget. So when 40% of your revenue base comes from the federal government, any change in policy affects your bottom line. State taxation comprises 39% of the state's revenue, and of that 39%, about 35% is stamp duty. So overall, stamp duty accounts for about 10% of our revenue base. And after stamp duty, the next largest component of our taxation revenue is payroll tax. And in addition to state taxes and federal grants, that comprises in total 79%. The 21% that remains are things like fees, registrations, licensing, dividends. But another interesting point I wanted to make about the impact to the budget is, as you know, we have a number of state-owned corporations, especially in the utilities area, which are subject to determination by independent regulators. So the Australian Energy or Electricity Regulator made a determination and said to the state government, and this is completely independent of the Poles and Wires transactions, they said, your electricity, which we knew already, your electricity businesses are inefficient. We've determined this is the effective, or this is the appropriate cost for their efficiency. And what that meant to our dividend position in 15-16 is, before that determination, we anticipated getting $1.3 billion in dividends from those businesses. We're now getting around $400 million. So it's $900 million hit in 1 year. And that's why the difference between 15-16 and 2014-15 is so huge. But it shows you the volatility of our revenue base. And that's why when we're talking about tax reform, you really need to look at what are the state's revenue bases and how can you provide more certainty into the future. And as a team, we don't like the fact that in order to maintain our state revenue, we need to charge stamp duty, we need to charge payroll tax, we effectively need to charge people for creating jobs. These are not taxes that we enjoy taking money from people on, but that is the traditional base of the states. And I often remark, but it's the truth, that during the war effort back in the Second World War, the states gave up income tax to the feds, and we've never seen it again, and we never got it back. But the bottom line is the federal government generates the vast majority of the revenue through income tax, yet the states have the huge cost base and increasing cost base because we're the service deliverers in the federation. We are the ones that provide the health services, the education services. And so that vertical fiscal imbalance is actually getting worse. And that's why it's really appropriate for ShyBiz and for all of us to be having a very wholesome and fulsome discussion on the future of tax reform. And I hope in this short amount of time I've been able to explain why it's so critical for us as a state and for all the states to engage in this discussion because of our revenue base versus the costs that are going out. At the moment, the health budget is about 28% of our overall budget, and education's about 21%. So health and education account for half of the state's revenue or budget expenditure going out every year on the day-to-day services, and that's going to grow. And, you know, with the ageing population and with the demand on our health services, that's only going to increase. And we know because of a change in policy from the federal government, come 2017, 2018, the diminution in the funding the feds are giving us will actually hit our bottom line in health and education in 2017, 2018, and that will get worse as the years go on. And that again comes down to the volatility of our tax base. But what are we doing as a state about job creation? What are we doing to support business grow and employ people? Well, I'm very pleased to say that after the election, we were able to extend the Jobs Action Plan, which means that if you are a payroll tax paying employer and you create a job, you will get a rebate on payroll tax. And we've extended that another 4 years to 2019. And it's very interesting that for the Sutherland local government area, in the last three and a bit years since we introduced the scheme, we've received around 2,300 applications, and around $2.1 million in rebates have been paid to businesses in the Shire who've actually employed people, which is fantastic. So thank you if any of you are in the room. But what we've also done, actually the legislation went through Parliament last week, was extend an incentive to very small businesses who don't pay payroll tax. If you create a job, even if it's a part-time job, you have the potential to get a grant of $2,000 just for creating a position. And it doesn't mean if that person changes what they do over time. So long as they stay on your books for a year, you get a $2,000 incentive payment to create that position. So we're looking forward, always looking at ways in which we can really encourage businesses to employ people. And coupled with our issues around housing supply, coupled with our growing economy, and coupled with the huge spend we're doing in infrastructure, job creation for us is a big challenge. And since we've been in government, we've already increased jobs by more than 200,000 positions. We have a target of creating 150,000 jobs in the next 4 years. But ironically, because our state is doing so well, because we've turned around key indicators which were lagging, because we have the highest business confidence, the highest retail confidence, the highest employment base, the challenge is that as the mining boom eases off in WA and Queensland, we're finding people who left New South Wales to find work elsewhere are coming back to New South Wales. So our net migration is the highest it's been since the 1970s. And that puts extra pressure on jobs. So it's a good challenge to have, but it also means that we need to be ever more vigilant in creating those jobs. And in addition to job creation, of course, it also puts pressure on infrastructure. People want to live somewhere when they come back to New South Wales. And I did want to address the issue of housing affordability because it's been, as it should be, quite topical of late. We believe as a state government, the best thing we can do to address housing affordability is to increase supply and to address supply. And that's why, because of our strong budget position, we were able to put $400 million into what we call the Housing Acceleration Fund. This was a fund we established back in 2012 to make sure that as a government we were providing the funds for all that infrastructure that's required to actually build houses, allow the private sector to get in there and build houses and dwellings, I should say, not just houses but units and townhouses and mixed dwelling. So since we've been in government, we established that fund in 2012. We've invested now nearly $1 billion in that fund. We have the highest level of approvals in the last 2 decades for housing, but the challenge is converting those approvals to actual dwellings. And that's why we're working overtime to address that issue. We're investing so much in making sure we have that infrastructure in place to allow those dwellings to get up. And by the same token, we're also making sure we're streamlining our planning laws, but also having a crack team in planning to be able to convert those approvals to construction as soon as possible. So it's about reducing red tape, about investing in supply, but also making sure that we're not just planning to deal with the pent-up demand, because there was an underinvestment for many years. Not only are we dealing with pent-up demand, but really planning for the future as well. So these are some of the challenges that we face in the next little while, but they're great challenges to have, and it's because we are in such a strong position. So for us as a government, coming from a position where we inherited, we were last or second last in the country on all the major indicators, to be now number 1 is a fantastic achievement. But I always say that with a grain of caution, because there are lots of challenges we face in the future, and that's why, again, I want to thank Shirebiz for engaging this process of reform, because unless we really deal with the issue of the federation and the financial relations between the federal government and the state government, we will continue to have to rely on what are essentially incentive-based taxes. And we don't want to have to rely on that in the future. We'd much prefer to have a tax base which was provided more certainty, less volatility, and which we believe was fairer. But you can't really make those adjustments unless there is agreement with the other states and the federal government. And the Premier and I and the whole team are absolutely committed to that process. And we're looking forward to a process where we can engage with the federal government constructively. And I know both the Premier at his level with the Prime Minister and myself with the Federal Treasurer and our state colleagues are really looking forward to having this discussion. It's a discussion I believe that should have happened many years ago, and it has happened, but in terms of the future, we are at a critical stage whereby I think as a country and as a state, in order to be able to move forward and have that certainty in our revenue base, we need to really address this issue of reform. I believe in terms of financial relations, the Federation needs very strongly to be modernised. We need to really address the imbalance that occurs between the states providing the services and the federal government having most of the revenue. And we are unique. We are a continent, a country, and there's no way that Canberra can decide what resources Sutherland Hospital needs, for example. I mean, that doesn't work because of our landmass. The states have a critical role to play in providing those services and providing those day-to-day needs that make sure the population has a good quality of life and is able to sustain that quality of life. But we do need to get the funding arrangements on a more level playing field. So I'm very pleased that the Shibes working together with the local community and local members of Parliament has really engaged in this debate. It's absolutely essential, and we're looking for genuine and robust debate. And I think we should also not be afraid to talk about issues which we might think the public may not accept, or the public might feel they're not ready to accept, because we have a chance here to really make a difference in what the future will look like in terms of our financial relations. But we would love to be able to have a fairer tax base in New South Wales. We'd love to be able to reduce red tape further, but we are constrained by our existing revenue base. And every time we give a payroll tax concession, or every time we reduce a rate of any type of taxation, it means we're less able to provide extra services in health or education or transport, and that's the payoff. And so every time we have a hit to our revenue base, it limits our ability to then be able to spend that money elsewhere. And just to give you an example of what we inherited, when we came to government, revenue growth was at around 6.6% and expenses growth was at around 7.2%. So the Labor Party was spending more than it was receiving. During our time in government, we've changed that around. So our revenue growth is just more than 4% and our expenses growth is just 3.7% or thereabouts. So we've managed to turn that around. But we anticipate that our revenue growth, because of the drop in dividends, because of the relativities in GST, because of the federal changes to health and education, which kicks in 2017, 2018, we anticipate our revenue growth will go from just above 4% to down to 2.8% over the next 4 years. So it's going to be such a challenge for us to keep our expenses growth less than 2.8%, but we've promised to do that, because that's how you manage good budgets and good government. And that's how you keep the economy going. And that's why we have a huge challenge ahead of us. And even though we're in the best position of any state in the country, we need to be careful about how we address those things in the future, because we will not ever again, so long as we're in government, put the state in a position where we're not living within our means. That is a big no-no. And just to give you an example, every year that Labor was in government, they spent around, on average, $1.3 billion more than they said they would on their budget. They lack the discipline. And we've made some tough calls, and I'll give you one example. We said that public servant wages growth would not exceed 2.5%, including super. We've kept that policy in place, and in the current environment, that's not really about policy given inflation, but that saved us about $1.6 billion. So we've been able to invest that $1.6 billion by keeping wages growth under control into hospitals and schools and transport and other community services. And that's an example of what good governments do: make the tough decisions up front and then make sure that we put that back into the community in relation to frontline services and infrastructure. And the one thing that I'm perhaps proudest about is that our reform agenda will continue. We will continue to make sure that we reduce waste, duplication and red tape. But having done all that, we're spending record amounts in infrastructure and record amounts in services. So through those tough decisions, we've been able to strengthen our budget position and really build ourselves for the future. And I just want to end on this point before I open it up to questions, and that is every single dollar, and this is a big difference between us and our predecessors, every single dollar we receive over and above what we get or what we expect in tax. So every single dollar of windfall tax revenue goes straight into infrastructure. We have a fund in New South Wales called Restart, and we also have the Housing Acceleration Fund. So every single dollar we get that we didn't expect to get from taxation goes straight into infrastructure. It doesn't go into waste, it doesn't go into hiring more back office public servants. That's what happened in the past. And that's why our state's been able to move forward. Every time you build something, every time you invest in something, you're creating jobs, you're growing the economy. And that's exactly what we've been doing over the last 4 years. And I hope if the last 4 years is any indication, now that we're in the budget position we have, we're able to invest further into the future. And I believe our largest and biggest challenge is our financial relationship with the federal government. And that's why the next few months are so critical in the future of not just New South Wales but the country. A strong New South Wales means a strong Australia. And that's why the next few months is so critical, and that's why I'm so grateful to ShyBiz for really engaging with us in having these discussions on tax reform. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to any of the questions you might have to ask. Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, here we go.
Thank you. Treasurer, thank you very much for your most positive presentation this morning, which has been very much appreciated. Much of the discussion this morning has been on tax reform, but we haven't heard any discussion as to new wealth creation, the opportunity to create new industries. In the era of new energy revolution, digitisation that's occurring across the world, which will impact on Australia, what opportunities do you think there is for New South Wales to get involved in areas such as high value add manufacturing, and also the opportunity to engage with the Western Airport, Badgerys Creek, as a focus for a long-term strategic plan for New South Wales?
You know, I think that's a very, very valid question, and there's no doubt that as the mining sector is slowing down, that there is more focus on service sector, in particular things that we are good at here in New South Wales. And I think given the infrastructure boost that we've given, that is actually generating associated industry and is really supporting the supply chain. So when you build something, you hire subbies, you hire tradies, you hire a whole multitude of people, and so the positive impact on jobs, both directly and indirectly, is phenomenal. But also I think New South Wales is really poised to take on at a global level foreign investment, which will really boost our industries to be able to increase their innovation capacity. And what we're finding is as the gap between New South Wales and the other states increases, one challenge is the other states aren't purchasing our services as much as they were able to because they're not in a position to do so. And so we're really finding that the increased level of foreign investment is supporting a lot of our industry. Just to give you one example, on the North West Railing, for the first time we have Italians and Spaniards investing in major infrastructure in Australia, which for the first time is great news. The fact that globally recognised best companies are investing in New South Wales is a huge boost for us. And I think that growth in the economy allows businesses to be more courageous in innovative solutions, and also has confidence that because we have a strong government who is growing the economy, that they can be relied upon to increase confidence in New South Wales. Thank you.
Treasurer, Jeff Forsyth from ShyBiz. Sutherland Shire needs more housing and employment zones or lands. Can we figure in future New South Wales government plans, because at the moment we're not even classed as a major centre in the sub-regional strategy?
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that we've got major work to do in our planning reform. So we have in this year's budget, we have, or 15-16, we have invested in social housing. I think there's an $8 million contribution we've made to upgrade some social housing accommodation. But that Housing Acceleration Fund that I mentioned before, the $400 billion investment, isn't just going to growth areas, it's also going to inbuilt areas. So we'll look at areas in which we can identify potential for housing, get on the ground, build the infrastructure to make sure that increases. We appreciate the potential the Shire has, no doubt about that. And as a government, we're working very closely through the leadership of our Planning Minister, Rob Stokes, to identify those areas and really make sure our funds go towards building extra development in those areas. So it's a big balance between community expectations and community views versus how fast we can go. So we need to bring the community with us at the same time. But please be assured we appreciate not just what the Shire contributes, but the potential for the Shire to contribute even greater, so long as we have that support on the ground through government. So it's definitely on our radar. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. One more question. This morning we've been talking about GST and the potential for increase in GST. Do you, as a member of the state government, support a broader and increased GST to minimise business taxes and provide New South Wales generally with more funds for state expenditure?
Well, the Premier has been saying, and as I've been saying, we think everything should be on the table. But when you're talking about major taxation reform, you can't just look at one aspect of it. So we are up for any discussion which makes the system fairer for everybody and also gives states more certainty into future funding. So we are open to looking at all those suggestions. I was very heartened to hear the South Australian Premier, who's a Labor Premier, come up with some novel suggestions last week about what he would like to see on the table. So our attitude is we'll go there with some very strong views, but our attitude is we think everything should be on the table and we need to have a big heart-to-heart and an open discussion without fear of the consequences about what the future tax base should look like. And we've said very strongly, from a New South Wales perspective, we think everything should be on the table because what we have before us is not sustainable. None of the states will be able to absorb the future cuts to growth funding in health and education that have been proposed, which kick in 17-18. That's not sustainable for any state. And we're the strongest state, and we know it's not sustainable for us. Even though we're doing well, we're not doing well enough to close that gap. And that's why these discussions are so important. And we are happy to look at everything that's put on the table, and we ourselves will be putting some very big ideas on the table. And we hope that all the other states, and the feeling I get is that everybody is at a place now where there's genuine momentum for reform and genuine momentum for bringing people with us. And I have to say, our Premier Mike Baird has had a big role in that because he's proven to other political leaders around the country that if you're bold, have a view, trust the community, tell the community what you're doing up front, and they will support you. And I think that's given everybody around the country a bit of courage, I have to say. I know we're biased here in New South Wales, but I think the way the Premier and the government conducted itself leading up to the election and subsequently has really demonstrated that the community is reasonable and will give you a fair go if you respect them and tell them what you're doing. So we take great heart in the fact that we told everybody what we'd do. We're now doing that, and we're repaying the community by building trust, but also by investing in the things that matter to them. And I think the community is ready to have an open discussion, so long as we're prepared to be bold and courageous and be respectful of the other states and the federal government in the process.
Malcolm Gunning, Real Estate Institute. Congratulations. I think that the state government is doing a wonderful job with increasing supply of property. We like to see some of your zoning changes around some of your old suburbs, the Chester Hills, Yagoona. What we don't like, though, is the bracket creep with stamp duty. Particularly, it's disproportionate as far as home buyers are concerned. And also, Gladys, land tax with commercial property. If you go down many of the high streets, Oxford Street, Military Road, any of the ones around here, look at the empty shops. I'm sure you appreciate now, with the 3-year rolling average for the Valuer General has with the price increases, and I sit on that committee with the Valuer General, that's going to take up about 30 or 40% of the rent. It's a disincentive for small business.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt, and I think the points you raise are symbolic of the tax base states have to rely on. But in terms of housing affordability, the last thing you want to do as a government is make the situation worse. And we know that in terms of our new home buyer grants, for example, we know that in 2014 there was a 25% increase in the number of people who applied for those grants compared to 2013. So we know people are still entering the market. And we also know that from our perspective, from a state government perspective, the best thing we can do is to increase supply. The last thing you want to do is make a decision which heats up the market even more and makes things less affordable. That's an unintended consequence we don't want to contribute to, but we are looking at the situation very closely, and if we feel there's something in addition that we can do, we will look at that. But we believe the best way to progress that matter in the near future is obviously supply, and secondly, to have a broader discussion with the federal government on the entire tax base, and they're the two things that we need to look at. But there's no doubt that the states do rely on taxes we'd rather not have to rely on, but that's just the nature of our federation, and that's why this is such a good time to really address the issue of tax reform. And, you know, we face these challenges now and we're in a very strong position. Imagine the challenges we'd face if we were a WA or another state who hasn't done the reform and who's now in a position where they're having to put out their hand to the federal government. We certainly don't ever want to be in that position, and we know that we need to create a budget which can withstand the shocks. If there's a change in attitude from the federal government or a change in policy, or they decide to put money in a different year as opposed to what we anticipated, we need to make sure our budget can withstand that. And that's why those discussions the next few months are so critical.
Questions?
Thank you, Minister. Michael Forshaw from ShireBiz. In the last couple of years, the Shire has seen the closure of the fisheries, Caltex and soon to be Toyota. We've also witnessed over quite a number of years governments of both political persuasions, including the one that I have had an association with, the Labor Party, the Labor government and the current government, with a move of government agencies, departments to Western Sydney. Western Sydney promotes itself very well, as we know, and there's a lot of interest and obviously both economic and political drivers. One thing that I know I'd like to see, and I think a lot of people would like to see, is consideration being given to any moves of departments or agencies. At least maybe one of them could get to the Shire. It's the second biggest local government area in New South Wales, and for a long time, you know, it's a lovely place to live. It is small business focused in many ways. It has a terrific train service, and I compliment you and previous governments for that.
And I just saw Howard Collins here, head of Sydney Trains. Yeah. Welcome, Howard.
Yeah. So it has all these advantages, and rather than see 65%, I think it is, of employees who live in the Shire leave the Shire every day, we'd like to see more of them remaining here to work. And one way of doing that is to attract, if the government was persuaded to do it, some government employment, rather than seeing it all go, with no disrespect, rather than seeing most of it go to Western Sydney. So could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd say thank and congratulate Shire and especially ShireBiz for really, I think, creating an entrepreneurial zeal down here. I mean, the Shire businesses are self-starters, and I always like to think, of course, we will consider where we locate government departments and decentralisation policies, but the best thing we can do as a government is encourage people to grow their businesses, to hire staff and grow the economy. And that's why a lot of the policies we've done in relation to reducing payroll tax and creating incentives, but also investing in critical infrastructure locally, whether it's in hospitals or roads or trains, is so critical for the success of a local community. And there's no doubt that a community gets a boost when there's an extra government department or extra employees that come into the area. But I actually think what we can do to support the growth of the economy and businesses and allow people to get on with the job of doing what they do without hindering that growth is the best thing a state government can do. And I'm so encouraged by what I witness here myself in terms of the growth of business and the growth of the Shire and the growth of community assets. But there's always opportunities into the future, and what we need to do as a government is create those opportunities and create that opportunity for growth. And of course, we'll consider where future departments go, but I think the Shire's bigger and better than that. You don't need to rely on that as your only means of growing local support and growing local jobs. It's about making sure we provide those opportunities that no matter where you live and no matter where you choose to work, that you have those choices and options. And some people will want to work in the Sydney CBD because that's where the jobs they want to do are there, and so it's up to us to make sure we get the train service faster. I know Howard, who's the CEO, catches the train from Woolooware every day. Do you still do it? Howard still catches... Sorry? Yeah, it's... There you go. The Shire. So harking back to the old days, I catch the bus to work every day and Howard gets the train. So whenever he and I met, we'd have the conversation about how was your train, and he'd ask how my bus was. But the point is that we need to make sure that the mark of a society is giving people options. So that of course there'll be people who live in the Shire who want to work in the Shire every day, and we need to make sure those options are there through supporting local business, through supporting local infrastructure, local institutions like hospitals, education facilities, etc. But there'll also be a cohort of people who will always want to work in the Sydney CBD or Western Sydney for that matter, and we need to make sure the infrastructure is there. The key, in my view, to a successful society, to a successful community is giving people choices and making sure we make those choices available. And that's why you shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all proposal to new policy ideas. It should be about how can we make sure every individual, no matter where they live or where they want to work, has the opportunity to be their best and get access to real world-class services. And that's the responsibility we have as a government, I believe.
Thank you, Gladys. I think that's it for the questions, isn't it, Tony? Yep. So one final question maybe. If there's none, we'll move on. Okay, you're doing a good job then.
Thanks,
Could we
guys.
have Malcolm Kerr and Tony Blaine, please? I now understand why Gladys was held up, because our border controls are very strict down here. And
I know, I don't have a passport for
that's
the show.
it. Well,
so.
we might be able to fix that. So that's the reason
Thank
why
you,
you were
Gus.
delayed. But if Malcolm and Tony, here we go.
And it's great to see Malcolm here. He was in Parliament for so many years, and it's great to see him continue to contribute to the community. So thank you, Malcolm. Oh no, it's okay. Do you want me to leave or stay?
Getting organised. So no, they're getting organised.
Wow.
See, the Shire is very generous.
Too generous. Thank you, Malcolm. They're gorgeous. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Thank you. Wow. Oh, thank you, Tony. That's very, very kind of you. And thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thank you.
You keep me honest.
No. If I may just say a couple of words, the Minister's always been a good listener to the folks at ShireBiz. Thanks to Mark and to Lee, there's been a conduit there for the Shire, and what a pleasure it is for us to have her here today. She brought down her budget last week, and here she is in the Shire. I think she's straight out of here to other commitments. We're very, very proud of the presenters we've got today. And with regard to a couple more gifts, there's the tax one. I mean, that's you know, for the Treasurer. And here's your Shire passport, actually.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
We'll get a photo op shortly. And my wife cooked you some tax cookies.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
So you can
very
eat them.
much.
You can eat them in the car heading back. But I'm just going to read quickly the words that Malcolm and I and Barry chose to give the Minister, given the focus on the Shire, which we hope will continue.
Absolutely.
She's an honorary member. So this is a Shire passport presented to the Honourable Gladys Berejiklian MP, New South Wales State Treasurer, who was appointed an honorary Shire member. This passport will minimise border delays into and out of the Shire.
Good.
We appreciate your visit and time with us today. Please accept a big thank you from your Shire friends.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tony. That's so generous of you. Thank you. Yeah, I think we need a photo. No excuses
Immediately.
next time.